Hello everyone! In this lesson, we will learn how to display custom post type posts on the front end of our website. Let's begin with our home page. So in this section, we just want to load in two of our event items, or event posts. At the moment, this is just hard-coded fake static HTML. So right now, let's dive into the code and make this pull in dynamic WordPress data. So within our theme folder, let's jump into frontpage.php. So down here around line 16, we see the heading that reads upcoming events. So right below that line, we can just add a bit of test text and say testing 1, 2, 3. And that way we can see that we're coding in the right spot in the template file. Okay, now on our home page, WordPress is not going to automatically query for any posts for us, right? WordPress is just going to query that one individual page named home. So if we want to pull in two event items or two event posts, that means we are going to need to write our own custom query. So back in the code, let's delete testing 1, 2, 3, and instead let's put together a custom query. So obviously we want to drop into PHP, and let's create a variable to store the custom query in. We can make up any variable name we want, but just to make sense, why don't we call this homepage events? The name's up to you, but that's what I'm going with. And we want that to equal a new instance of the WP query class. You might remember that we created a custom query 3 or 4 lessons ago, but let me refresh your memory a bit. WP query is a class that WordPress provides for us, and it is the blueprint. It's going to do all of the heavy lifting for us. Within these parentheses, we just tell the class what data we want to query from the database. The class will do its thing, and then we will have this variable or this object named homepage events that will contain everything we need, and then we can just loop through this object to display the content on the front end. Okay, so our first step within these parentheses right after the class name is we want to provide it with an array of arguments. So the word array and then parentheses, and then I like to drop down to a new line just to stay organized. And now we just tell WordPress what we want to query from the database. So let's say how many posts we want, right? Because we only want 2. So let's use the parameter posts per page, and let's set that to 2. And then let's add a comma so we can add another argument. Here's a very important one. Let's target the parameter named post type. And you might be able to guess what we want to set that to. Event, right? Because that's the custom post type that we're trying to load. And we will now have this variable or object that contains 2 event posts. So now we just need to loop through this variable to display it on the front end. So right below this code, let's begin a while loop. So the word while and parentheses and then curly brackets. So remember, within these parentheses, you tell the code how many times it should loop. Now luckily, this variable or object that we created is self-aware of how many posts it contains. So within the while loop parentheses, we can just target that variable name, homepage events, and then we can look inside that object with dash greater than, and then we can call its method named have posts. Okay, so now the while loop will keep repeating as long as there are still posts to loop through. And then within the curly brackets, the body of the while loop, what do we want to do first? Well, we always want to begin by running the function thePost, as that will get the data ready for each post each time the loop repeats itself. Only we don't just want to call the global version of thePost. Right before this, we want to begin by looking within our object, right? So homepage events dash greater than. Okay, so now after that, we are free to output a little bit of HTML onto the page. So why don't we just close out of PHP here, and then on this line, drop back into PHP to close out the while loop. And now in between on this line, we can add HTML. For now, let's keep it simple. Let's just output a bulleted list item, and within it, let's go into PHP and output the title. Okay, so if we save that, cool. on the front end of our website, we see Poetry Day and the Science of Cats. And now, instead of just a simple bulleted list item for each of these, let's go ahead and actually use this visually appealing structure and style. So back in our text editor, right underneath this PHP code we've been writing, we see a div with a class of event summary. Starts there and ends right here. And then right below it, there's another event summary div. So we don't need two of them. We just want to use one of them as a template. So let's delete this bottom one. And then why don't we just cut and paste this remaining event summary div into our clipboard. Okay, so we've deleted that fake static HTML. And then let's just paste it into our while loop and hollow out the fake data. So on this HTML line with the list item, just delete that and then paste in your clipboard. And now let's just start hollowing things out. Let's start with the title. So instead of this fake title, let's drop into PHP and call the title. And then instead of this fake excerpt or short description, let's pull in the first sentence or two from the main content field. So let's delete this example text and instead drop into PHP and echo out the results of a function named WP trim words, and then we give this function two arguments. The first argument is the content that you want to trim, so we can access the content by just saying get the content, and that's a function, so include parentheses after it. And then the second argument is how many words you want to trim it to. So let's just say the first 18 words. So let's save that. Cool, so we see Poetry Day and the Science of Cats. Next, let's set things up so that if you click on either the title or the Learn More link, it takes you to the permalink or a screen with just that one individual event post. So back in our code, here's the title headline, and here we see the A tag for the link. So within the href attribute, let's just delete the hashtag sample value and instead go into PHP and call the permalink function. Now we want to do the same thing for the Learn More link. So to avoid some typing, let's just copy and paste that little bit of PHP. And then here's the Learn More link. So within that href attribute, delete the hashtag, paste in the clipboard. Cool, we're good to go. So now if I click on this title of Poetry Day, we run into a bit of a problem. We can see that up in the address bar that takes us to /event/Poetry Day, and we would expect that to be the permalink for that one post, but instead we see a welcome to our blog with 0 content, and the actual title attribute that we can see up in the tab for that page is page not found. Now don't worry, all we need to do to fix this is rebuild WordPress's rewrite or permalink structure. To do that, you can just head over to the WordPress admin and down in the settings menu, click on permalinks. Now you don't even need to switch to a different option. You can leave whatever option you're currently using, but just come down here and click Save Changes. As soon as you save, you'll see this message, Permalink Structure Updated. And now if we go back to this page and refresh, cool, we see that the URL of event/Poetry Day indeed works. The reason we had to rebuild our permalink structure is because up until our previous lesson, WordPress has no idea what this keyword of event means up in our address bar, right? You and I know that this is tied to our new custom post type, but WordPress doesn't rebuild its permalink structure on every saved change. For performance reasons, it only updates the permalink structure at key moments. For now, let's focus on customizing this page template for our events, right? Because at the moment, this is using the template for blog posts. We can see we have a link here to take you back to the blog home, and it says posted by Brad on the date, in, and then it would say a category here. So this template makes sense for a blog post, but it's not well suited for an event post. Now at the moment, the theme file that is powering this screen and this URL is single.php. But what if we want a brand new theme file that is only responsible for event posts? Well, luckily, that's very easy to set up. So back in our text editor, in our theme folder, I want you to create a brand new file. And the name of this new file is very important. Let's name it single-event.php. Whenever we register a custom post type, WordPress will automatically be on the lookout for a file in our theme folder named single- and then whatever your custom post type keyword is. Okay, so in this new file, if I just say test123 and save, and then refresh, that theme file is indeed being used for individual event posts. Now next, why don't we go ahead and use the code from single.php as a starter template for this, and then we can just customize it in little ways that make sense for events. So back in our text editor, I will jump into single.php. I'm just going to copy the entire thing into my clipboard, and then back in single-event.php, just paste in my clipboard. And now let's just customize it so it makes more sense for an event instead of a blog post. So I think the first thing I will address is this beige area here in the meta box. Blog posts are more personal, so it makes sense to care who the author is. But in the case of an event, I don't think we need this meta information. Instead, we could just output the title of the event again. So here's the meta box. We can see posted by. So let's just delete all of that, including on the date and in the category. And instead, let's just drop into PHP and say the title. Cool. Next, let's update this blue link here. So instead of blog home, it says event home. And when you click on it, it should take you to a screen that shows you all upcoming events. So back in the text editor, here we see blog home. Let's just change that to events home. And now in terms of the actual URL that we should use when you click on that link, let's stop for a moment and I want to show you something. So up in the address bar, for this individual post, it's event/poetry day. But if I want to see a listing of all events, you can just get rid of the poetry day part and go to /event. Now we just ran into a bit of a problem. So again, in the tab bar for the title, we see page not found, and we can see that the page is blank. And this is because when we registered our new custom post type, we need to tell WordPress that that post type supports an archive. So right now, let's go edit the code that registers our custom post type. To refresh your memory, that file that controls that lives within our WordPress folder. So the folder where all of your WordPress system files live. And then within the WP content folder, remember we created this must use plugins or MU plugins folder. And within that folder, we created a PHP file with the code that registers our custom post type. Now right now, go ahead and open up this file in your text editor. Okay, remember this is the code where we register our post type. And to get back to the goal at hand, we want this post type to have an archive URL. So let's just add a parameter to the top level array. So maybe right before this public line, let's target the parameter named has archive, and then just set it to equal true. So let's save that. And then back in our browser, if I refresh this /event screen, cool, it's no longer page not found. Instead, it's a legitimate archive of all of the event posts. Now, if this is an archive with multiple events, you might want to look up in the address bar and think, would it make more sense if the URL was /events, plural, instead of just event? Well, let me show you how you can control what keyword gets used as the slug here. So back in our code, by default, whatever post type name we register when we first call this function, this will be the keyword or slug for that post type. But in a perfect world, we might want to use a singular name for the post type, but then a plural name for the URL or slug keyword. In our code, we can just add another item to this top level array. So right above this has archive line, let's create a new line. And the parameter name that we're interested in is rewrite. And then we want to set that to equal its own array. Okay, and then within that array, we just want to set a property or parameter of slug, and then we can set that to equal whatever we want. So you could say unicorn or pizza or whatever you want to show up in the URL. Let's just say events as in plural. Okay, so if I save that and then refresh the old archive that is /event, WordPress says, hey, page not found. I don't know what you're talking about. And that's because we changed the URL to events, plural. Okay, now changing gears, on this events archive screen that shows all events, you might notice that this formatting or styling makes sense for a blog post, but we'd probably want to display things differently for an event. Now at the moment, the theme file that is powering this screen and URL is archive.php. And if we want a new theme file that's only responsible for the event archive, all we need to do is go into our theme folder. Here it is. And let's create a brand new file in the theme folder. The name of this file is important. We want to call it archive dash and then whatever the name of our custom post type is. So in this case, event.php. So in this new file, if we just say 1234 and refresh, cool, we can see that that's the right theme file that's powering the archive. Why don't we just go ahead and use the regular archive.php as a starting place and then adjust it from there. So in regular archive.php, copy all of this into our clipboard, and then back in archive-event, let's just paste in our clipboard, and let's start from the top. We don't need the main large headline to be dynamic, so instead we could just hard code that to all events. And we don't need the subtitle to be dynamic. We could probably hard code that to see what is going on in our world. Let's save that. Okay, cool. Next, let's adjust how each individual post is displayed. So this styling makes sense for a blog post, but for an event, I think we can just recycle the homepage styling for events, right? Let's just reuse this styling with the little date circle and then the title and a blurb. So back in our text editor, in archive/event.php, let's scroll down a little bit. Here we can see the while loop begins. So anything after this curly bracket is going to run once for each post. And we can see here's where the HTML begins. And down here is where it ends. So let's just delete that and hollow it out. And then let's just copy and paste the HTML template for an event from our home page. So back in frontpage.php, this is the while loop that we wrote at the very beginning of this lesson. And remember this event summary div. Let's just copy that into our clipboard. And then back in archive event, let's just paste it in here. Let's save that. And if I refresh the all events archive screen, cool. And if I click on one, to bring things full circle, remember we wanted to update the URL when you click on Events Home. So if we want to edit this screen's template, in our text editor, we need to jump back into single-event.php. Here's the meta box, and more importantly, here's the Events Home link. You can see that its href is currently pointing towards site URL /blog. Now technically we could just change that to /events, but what if in the future we changed that slug? Well, then we would have to remember to change it here as well. So instead what we can do is delete that and use a WordPress function that will automatically get the URL for a post type archive. So we just echo out get post type archive link. And that's quite a long function name, but within its parentheses, then you just say the post type that you're interested in. So event. So if we save that, refresh, now we can click on Events Home, and it knows to take us back to /events. And that's going to bring this lesson to a close. Now you might be yelling at the screen saying, Brad, you're still using fake hard-coded dates for every event. I'm well aware of that, and it's something that we're going to fix in our next lesson. In order to set up the perfect date system for events, we are going to need to learn about something called custom fields. It's a super powerful topic. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's keep it rolling, and I will see you then.